I'm Ed Mendez with the Department of Veteran Services. Yeah, come on in. If you can, I mentioned it a second ago, please silence your cell phones as we roll through today's program. Just want to give you a quick roll of what we're doing. We have some agendas around, if you want them. I think they're up here by Robin that we can hand out if anybody's interested. But what we're going to be doing this morning is I'm going to give a brief on state benefits for the department. We have our field service director, Robin Wilson here, is going to do a brief on field services. The VA health system is here, Joe Baca and Scott Loginus. I'm sorry, Scott, I always do that. And from VBA, the Veterans Benefits, is here. They're going to be talking about PACT Act this morning, and I'll let them go into that. Teresa Figueroa is our Women Veterans Program Coordinator. She's here. She's going to be talking about the Women's Veterans Program along with our Highly Rural Transportation Grant and her upcoming conference, if I'm not mistaken. We have Drake Lemaster here is going to be talking about VA home loans and mortgages. So Drake, we're happy to have you here. And I think Chicky Gomez is supposed to be here. I don't know if he's here yet. Oh, there he is right there, Chicky. Is going to be talking about Department of Workforce Solutions, and that should take us till about noon or lunchtime, at which time we will be kind of buttoning things up. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So state benefits, what do we do in state benefits? The state benefits consist of all of our state benefits for veterans that are eligible, and our cemeteries and memorial programs. So we have one memorial right here in Angel Fire that some of you may be familiar with, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Along with that, we have a state veteran cemetery right below that. These are some of the state benefits that we have right now: tax exemptions, tax waivers, license plates, park passes, game and fish, veteran scholarships that are eligible. Those are all the state benefits that we use or that we have for eligible veterans here in the state of New Mexico. Again, Jeff George is our bureau chief for that part of our division, and he'll be here. If anybody needs a tax exemption or tax waiver, he should be able to help you with that as well. Our memorial program, again, that encompasses our 4 state veteran cemeteries. So right now we have a veteran cemetery. We have 2 cemeteries in Rio Doso or Capitan. It's Fort Stanton State Veteran Cemetery, and adjacent to that is the Historic Merchant Marine Cemetery. We also have the Gallup State Veteran Cemetery and the Angel Fire Veteran Cemetery. And here we go right there. So that's Fort Stanton, Gallup, Angel Fire, and the memorial facility right there. And those are all the numbers for those facilities. We do have another one coming on board. David's working real hard on getting that grant together. That facility is going to be in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and that will be our 4th veteran cemetery, but our 5th overall for the agency. So we're really excited about that. We have, I want to say, 26 active honor guard teams across the state of New Mexico. I think we have one here in Raton as well, right, David? Yeah. And with those honor guard teams throughout the state, we provide them, the Department of Veteran Services provides them a stipend for going out and doing these honors for veteran burials. With those honors comes a flag fold, a rifle volley, the sound of taps, the presentation of the flag. Again, this is what the honor guards do when they're out there. Yes, sir. You have a question?
Robert Gonzalez, I talked to you.
Hey, Mr. Gonzalez, good to see you, sir.
I talked to you here a while back about the honor guard here in Raton. I've been to a couple of them, and I was very disappointed. They weren't dressed. It looked like they picked them off the street. The only ones that I seen there that I went to, one of them was the Candelarios. They were in full uniform. Made a big difference. My biggest complaint is I'm due that honor, and I don't like getting somebody picked off the street with no clothes, no nothing. And we talked several times on that issue.
No, absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad you showed up. I did want to talk to you again about that. I did have our staff reach out to that honor guard commander, so absolutely, we want to make sure that every veteran gets an honorable burial. And that honorable burial, again, is that flag fold, at the very least, the flag fold, the sounding of taps, and hopefully a rifle volley. Again, we provide these honor guard teams a stipend for those uniforms. We want to make sure that everybody is dressed accordingly and that they are in fact providing those honorable services for our veterans. Again, we hold a biannual training specifically for that, and I think we talked about that, sir. And the cabinet secretary is aware of that, and him and I and David have had numerous conversations about that. But we have a biannual training, one down south in Las Cruces that we just held in April. We have another one coming up in August, right? We have another one coming up in August, and that's going to be in Albuquerque. And the idea at these trainings is we bring these honor guard teams together. We bring the National Guard in. The National Guard does the flag fold presentation. They show them how it's done, why it's done, and all the intricacies, of folding those flags and doing those honors. So that's kind of the idea behind that biannual training. There's just some data there on what we do. It says we currently have 40 honor guard teams. 25 or 26 of those are active right now, and that's the training that we do. Kind of shows you some of the training right there. And these guys are dressed like Robert was saying. These guys are dressed to the T. They come in, they get the training, and then they turn around and hopefully do that honorable burial service for these veterans. And that's exactly what we want them to do. That's why we hold this training and make sure that these guys, these men and women understand. And again, you have to remember, these are volunteer groups that do this training. So we want to make sure that David and myself are going out when they're doing these services so we can inspect them and make sure they're doing it in accordance with what the VA is asking for, what the state of New Mexico is asking for. The department has a Forgotten Heroes program. The Forgotten Heroes program, we reach out to all 33 counties, with Bernalillo County being our lead agency or our lead county. And what they do is if there's any indigent or homeless veterans out there that don't have a family member to speak of, we get those veterans, we have them turned over, or their cremains turned over to Bernalillo County. What Bernalillo County does is they hold them for us, and then we have one massive burial service for them, and we call that the Forgotten Heroes Burial Program. I think last year we did somewhere in the neighborhood of about 27 veterans, right? 28 veterans. This year we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 is what I think Bernalillo County is telling us. And again, these are for veterans who have no family. At the end of their life, the Department of Veterans Services, in essence, becomes their next of kin. Once we become their next of kin, we hold a service for them in Albuquerque. We do a motorcade transportation all the way up to Santa Fe, and then there at the National Cemetery in Santa Fe, we hold a burial for them, and that's the Forgotten Heroes Burial Program. If you've never been to it, I highly recommend that you come down to Santa Fe. David, when is that? Do we have a date this year?
September.
Late September, if I'm not mistaken. But again, it'll be on our website, nmdvs.org, so everybody will know about that Forgotten Heroes. Again, if you've never been to it, it's really, really touching. The VA cemetery director is there. A number of people from the county, our agency is there, and we salute these veterans and make sure that they have an honorable burial at the end of life. So again, they may have been indigent, but they are veterans, so we want to make sure that we, in fact, honor them and salute them. So that is our Forgotten Heroes program. The New Mexico Vietnam Veterans Memorial up here in Raton, I'm sure you should be familiar with our Angel Fire facility. It's just over the pass there in Angel Fire, New Mexico. Beautiful facility. We have a state veteran cemetery just on the bottom of the hill of that facility. We opened it in 2020. It is the Angel Fire State Veteran Cemetery. And at the top is the chapel, the museum, and the helicopter, and a nice park, Memorial Park area. What we're doing right now is David and myself, along with GSD, we're working through our capital outlay funds to bring a half-scale Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall to that facility. Matter of fact, we just had a meeting Monday, wasn't it? Monday or Tuesday about that. So that project has gone out to bid to general contractors, We're hoping to break ground sometime in June or July, and then start that turning shovels and that earthwork to bring that whole monument to fruition. We're hoping to be done by the end of the year because it's going to be mainly earthwork. We have a Worthing Memorial in Albuquerque is doing the granite panels right now, the etching of all the names. What's the number of the names? 58,000? 58,000 Vietnam veterans missing or deceased on that wall. So that's going to be a big, big addition to that campus. We're hoping that campus is
397 from the next.
309. Well, it's, yeah, 397. They say 398. Some say 399. New Mexico veterans will be on that wall as well, and we're also looking at doing a separate granite panel just for those Vietnam veterans from the state of New Mexico up there at that. I apologize, I should have had those boards here so everybody can see them. We'll do that next time. But yeah, so we should start that project off here relatively soon. Hopefully it'll be done by the end of the year. And that's just going to enhance that whole campus, that Angel Fire campus. So we'll have the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, we'll have the museum, and the Memorial Park, the chapel, and then just down the hill, we're also working on a walkway that'll serpentine down to the base, ADA compliant, obviously, and walking right up to the cemetery. So we're hoping that whole campus is going to be a big draw for the state of New Mexico and for veterans themselves, because right now, how many veterans do we have that come to the Run for the Wall right now?
Over 5,000.
Over 5,000 veterans come during this week for the Run for the Wall and stop there at Angel Fire. It's one of the main stops for them. Some of the events that the Department of Veteran Services has across the state. Again, the Military and Veterans Day at the legislature. We just had that upcoming. We have Memorial Day ceremonies. Again, we have these Memorial Day ceremonies across the state. We hold them at all of our facilities, at each one of our cemeteries, and we know we're going to have a big one here at the Memorial in Angel Fire. Military and Veterans Day at the New Mexico Expo. We have a day dedicated to military and veterans. I think it's first responders as well at the State Fair, so we're definitely excited about that one. It was a real big turnout last year. Everybody was there. Honor Guard Training Conference, again, we talked about that. We hold that twice a year, where we train these Honor Guard teams to do a great job, hopefully a great job when they're performing these services. The Forgotten Heroes Burial Program, we talked about that briefly. Now in Labor Day, we have a brick lane at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial there in Angel Fire as well. That's a huge turnout for us as well. We hold a Purple Heart ceremony. We participate in the homeless veterans stand downs across the state in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Farmington. I think we also hold one in Gallup. Again, Veterans Day across the state we're also part of. We're currently doing the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Ceremonies for the 50th anniversary of that. And then veteran business outreaches events across the state, such as we're doing today. This is one of our outreach that we have. So again, it's just about us getting the word out. If you don't know about DVS or you don't know about what we do, that's what we're here for. If there's some way that we can get you connected with the hospital, with VBA, with transportation, with women veterans, with field services for state benefits, again, that's what we're here for. We want to make sure that we're supporting and helping veterans. Our motto for the Department of Veteran Services is serving those who have served.
So good morning. My name is Robin Wilson. I am the Division Director of Field Services for New Mexico Department of Veteran Services. And what we do in my division is we file the federal service-connected claims for compensation and pension. We are the 22 veteran service officers and 16 offices throughout the state, and we file all of the veteran compensation and pension claims to VA. With the PACT Act, which is one of the largest pieces of legislation that's come out since GI Bill, many things have changed, and again, I'm going to let VA go over that. But we have been working very hard, increasing our number of veteran service officers, increasing our training, so that we can come out to the communities and help everybody understand exactly what that means in terms of what you could be eligible for your benefits or for your surviving spouses. I I am very passionate about veterans in our rural communities, and in field services, we are very excited to announce that we will be purchasing a mobile unit so that we can get to Raton. We haven't been here in a couple of years, and I apologize. We had COVID, we've had training and staff turnover, and I just came. But just because our veterans live in rural areas doesn't mean that you are forgotten. You're not forgotten by us, and you're certainly not forgotten by VA. Our state is huge, and I have to have an opportunity to get there. But we're coming. We have an office that we will share for Harding Union and Colfax County. Our veteran service officer, stand up, Jimmy. This is Jimmy Sice. He's our newest VSO, our veteran service officer out of our closest office to here, which is Las Vegas. We are creating an outreach plan so that we can get someone back into these state border counties. What we do is, like I said, we file the initial claims, we assist widows, the dependents of children with any pension claims. We do have an appeals certified veteran service officer, that's Arturo Marlowe out of our Las Vegas office. We can do the VA healthcare enrollment. We submit that to VA and then they'll determine your eligibility for that. And then we assist with veterans getting their records. We hear a lot of times veterans come into our office, they don't have their 214s, they're not sure if they can file, they haven't seen their records in 20, 30 years. We're able to help you do that. We're able to help recreate records, find 214s, get your service medals, anything that you need recreated, we can help assist with that. These are the offices that we currently have throughout the state. We're very excited. We did open this year an office in Taos, an office in Berlin. And then the only office that we're not currently staffing is our Albuquerque VA regional office, but we will be staffing that within the next 3 to 4 months. So up here, like I said, we have our Taos and our Las Vegas office, but we also entered into a partnership with Aging and Long-Term Services to share some office space in Clayton and Roy for Harding, Colfax, and Union County. With the PACT Act, we understand that transportation, and I don't want to take too much away from Teresa, but I want to let all the veterans know that if you are eligible for VA healthcare and you have VA appointments, especially coming from this area, we have the Highly Rural Transportation Grant. That is a grant that the VA and Department of Veteran Services that allow for transportation for any VA scheduled appointment. And that's not just New Mexico. So they do travel into Colorado, Arizona, Texas, and any CBOC throughout the state. So if it is a VA scheduled appointment, call us. I think we have well, Teresa will give you the number. Call and make a reservation approximately 3 days in advance, and we will schedule your transportation to and from that appointment, even if it's an overnight appointment. The last thing that Field Services does is we process, or we submit applications for all of the state benefits. And I see Jeff George, and I think you're going to talk about state benefits, or you have your table. So our state benefits division handles and processes your parks pass and your license plates, the wartime scholarships, everything that's a state benefit. Any field office, any veteran service officer in the state can submit those applications for you. So you can submit them by email, through mail, or down in Santa Fe, but we can also do them for you in our field offices.
My name's Joe Baca. I'm the executive assistant for the director of the New Mexico VA healthcare system, Robert McHenrick. I'm here on behalf of him, and I'll let my colleague introduce himself.
Scott Lajeunesse. I'm a management analyst out of the director's office for Cesar Romero out of the VA regional office in Albuquerque. And so today, can you guys hear me okay? So today we're here because we want to be in a partnership with the state, with our partners with VHA, to bring this information that got passed last year and try and give some details regarding the PACT Act and what it encompasses and how it can affect veterans and their families' lives. The Senate of Veterans Affairs named the bill after Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, who was deployed in Kosovo and Iraq with the Ohio National Guard. After returning home from his very last deployment, doctors diagnosed him with an autoimmune disorder and late-stage lung cancer, and both associated with his burn pit exposure. And he passed away in May of 2020, and he was only 39 years old. So you can see this is going to affect a lot of different age groups and a lot of different service members that served in a lot of different areas of the world. The PAC Act was a newly signed law in August 10th of 2022 by the President. It is, as Ms. Wilson said, one of the largest expansion of benefits in VA's history. The law expands benefits and cares of generations of veterans exposed to both toxic exposures, substances, and additional benefits for their survivors as well. It expands eligibility in the health care for veterans with toxic exposure, and with the PAC Act, it doesn't just cover Gulf War veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan. It also has additional benefits for radiation exposure as well as Agent Orange exposure. So we have 20 new presumptive conditions for burn pits and toxic exposures. More presumptive conditions were passed for Agent Orange and radiation. And so VA, we're going to provide toxic exposure screening, which Mr. Backel will touch on. And that'll be for every veteran that has exposure. And this also helps improve research, staff education, treatment, and related toxic exposures. So the purpose of this presentation that we'll give today is to give you an overview of the PAC Act, how it expands and enhances VA healthcare side, as well as the benefits eligibility side for our veterans and their survivors.
Okay, so what is the military environment exposure? As you can see there, in the past, many are familiar with things like Agent Orange, nuclear exposure, nuclear, biological, and chemical exposures. But what the PACT Act does is it expands these, what we consider exposure, to other things such as inhalation, ingestion, transdermal or intradermal, intravenous exposure to agents, which could be something as finite as dust, dust particles. If you served in the Middle East, you're familiar with the burn pits, with the environment that you're in. And we'll get into some of those places that we're including as considered under the PACT Act. And it really expands VA healthcare for a lot of folks who otherwise in the past either were not eligible for VA healthcare or were limited service-connected disabled. So myself included, many veterans around the country are seeing a huge increase in their eligibility. Next slide. So toxic exposures. As you can see, we mentioned nuclear, chemical, and biological agents, but with air pollutants and warfare agents, other items. So if you've worked in certain career fields and in certain environments, whether it be aboard ship, on the flight line, if you're exposed to noise, vibrations, things like that, your RD guys, artillery, if you were exposed to consistent loud noise in spite of the fact that we all get hearing protection, things of that nature. These are all being considered under exposure. And what we're doing now is some of the screening, as Scott mentioned. That's one of the things at the hospital side that we're touching upon now.
With the PAC Act, you're going to hear the word presumptive quite a bit because of those 20 additional conditions. Also, they're looking at more conditions down the road. So keep that in mind that there will be more stuff down the road. This is just the initial release. One of the nice things about the PAC Act, they thought it through and they've added staffing for both the VHA side and VBA side so that we can handle the influx of new patient care as well as new claims coming through the VA so that we don't get into a big backlog situation both on the appointment side and on processing the claims for all these new presumptives. So with the presumptive service connection, to go into it a little bit, what it's going to do is there's 3 elements to a service connection to be granted in this event. One, the very first thing we look at, was there an event in service? So if you were diagnosed or you were injured in service and there's documentation of that, That's the first way to get service connected. Next is you have a current diagnosis. If you don't have a current diagnosis, we need to establish that. Going through either the healthcare side or your private provider can additionally provide that. A nexus, a link, a medical opinion can be used to link your current diagnosis to something that happened, or an exposure, or something else that may have happened to you in the service. Getting that nexus or medical opinion to provide that link back to that service incident is something that we need to draw a service connection. Some service connections, however, you hear the word presumptive, automatically qualify. It presumes that the disabilities were caused by military service, such as a military toxic exposure, and such as like burn pit exposures and stuff like that. Because there's unique circumstances, presumed condition is diagnosed in the veterans within the certain groups, and we're going to go over those here in just a little bit for the PAC Act. There are a lot of different locations for PAC Act. Initially, people thought it was just Afghanistan, just Iraq, just Saudi Arabia, or just Kuwait. As you can see up on the slide, you have Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Yemen, Qatar, you got Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain. So you have a lot of different locations, such as Somalia, that weren't previously looked at for presumptives. And here's the initial list of the initial 20 conditions. As you can see, I won't go through each of them, but you're going to see that mainly they're respiratory conditions and cancers. As I said, with the PAC Act, this also has allowed VA to streamline the process to add conditions to the presumptive list. In the past, it had to go all the way through Congress and have the president sign it. The PAC Act has now given the ability of the Secretary of the VA to approve new presumptive conditions to the list. So it'll be a lot shorter process than we've seen in the past to get conditions added to the presumptive list. Additionally, we have some new locations for like the herbicide exposures. As you can see, they've added a lot of different ones that we've had veterans come to us in the past and say, hey, well, they were using this stuff here. We didn't have that data at the time or the approval to grant those things unless there was a specific incident or diagnosis in service. So what the PAC Act has done with these additional locations, these additional dates, we can now see based on deployments, service 214s, they'll show what deployment records, all that kind of stuff can now show us if a veteran was in these locations, and we can grant based off of being in these new locations. Additional disabilities have been added for Agent Orange. So we do have high blood pressure now, also considered under hypertension.
Monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. So basically, it's basically a catch-all for other items that you may have. And you see a lot of these on here. These are the ones that for us, it's a VBA. The VBA is the ones making the decisions, but we'll get into how we on the healthcare side are identifying these here in a bit. But the huge ones that a lot of folks have here are, of course, high blood pressure and diabetes, type 2 diabetes. There has been a significant link to Parkinson's disease, particularly to folks who served up on Camp Lejeune. So a lot of folks know about the Camp Lejeune water situation from like the 60s to the 80s, mid-80s. The water there was tainted, and what we're seeing now is a lot of Marines, sailors, whoever came through Pendleton was where I was, Lejeune. They are showing high risk levels for Parkinson's disease. And so this is expanding beyond that to other theaters that Scott talked about.
Yeah, and one of the other things that VA is doing to outreach, not just doing these town halls and trying to get out to cities, but anybody that's ever filed with VA previously and they've been denied for these conditions, VA has sent letters to their last known address to try and let them know that they can come back in and ask us to take a look at it and get that service connected. We're also reaching out to survivors of veterans that have passed away from these conditions that weren't previously eligible, and now we're reaching out to their survivors as well to get them to come in to file those claims. So we're trying to be as proactive as possible through mailing, our outreach programs to get this word out there and get veterans to get these benefits and help themselves out.
So getting into expanding healthcare eligibility, we are expanding under Section 103 of the new law, the PACT Act, which went into effect on January 1st, into these three categories: veterans who participate in toxic exposure risk activities defined by the law in active duty, and this also includes training, which is huge because, as many of you may know, in the past, if you didn't serve in theater or if you weren't at a place where Agent Orange was used, you couldn't claim that. Now things like the training environment or preparation, going to the field, things of that nature, you're now eligible to make those claims for presumptive service-connected disability. Getting into Category 2, Scott mentioned several of these theaters of operations, and that includes the airspace above these operation areas. So you see Uzbekistan, Yemen, Lebanon, all these areas that otherwise we hadn't before classified as forward deployed or combat zones. As many of you know, these are the places, if you're on the ground, you receive combat pay. So this is taking it to another level whereby you didn't receive combat pay for flying above Uzbekistan, but now you could, in theory, if you're an Air Force or any type of air wing personnel, you could claim that as a possible theater for exposure. And then Category 3, folks who served for these other operations, we're all familiar with Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, Vietnam War, other conflicts, but this expands it into these other ones: Operation New Dawn, Operation Inherent Resolve, Resolute Support Mission. These are ones that some of your National Guard and reservists may have been activated in support of. And one of the biggest complaints we hear at the hospital is that National Guardsmen and women and reservists are not eligible for certain disabilities because they weren't activated under Title 10. And so that's something that, a big complaint that we hear. This opens up the door for folks to be looked at again. And if you were operating in support of one of these missions, you may now be eligible for additional benefits, whether it be through VBA or the healthcare side. Strengthening our environmental research, and so this is what Scott was talking about as far as how we identify presumptive conditions that we believe are linked to military service. Those of you who served in and around Vietnam, particularly the brown water Navy we call them, guys and gals that were naval personnel who maybe didn't set foot on the ground in Vietnam, but were aboard ships off the coast, operated in the deltas, things of that nature. Those folks, I think it was 2 years ago, became eligible for Agent Orange exposure eligibility. What this is increasing those considerations for folks that are having cancers, toxic exposures that are leading to mental health issues, respiratory issues, as Scott mentioned. So this is expanding what we're looking at as things that may be linked to military service. The research aspect of it is what VHA is doing. Many folks don't realize the Veterans Health Administration, or one of three branches under the VA, have a robust research program nationwide, and we're at the forefront of a lot of medical innovations. The first liver transplant was done at a VA. The nicotine patch was developed at the VA. X-rays were trialed for the first time, believe it or not, ages ago at the VA. So that's just a history lesson, but this is showing what we do now, how we look at veterans, their conditions, where do they serve. I mentioned Camp Lejeune because we're seeing now, within the last 10 years or so, guys and gals that served on Camp Lejeune are at a ridiculously high rate of risk for Parkinson's. And it's something that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and because of VA research, we're noticing that. That being said, it's important for folks that served in these theaters to register with the associated registry groups. There's the Gulf War Registry, Vietnam and Agent Orange Registry. There are others that come to mind, but we can get you information on those as well. I would also encourage folks to work with our partners at New Mexico Department of Veteran Services because they have all that information as well. Next slide. And extending healthcare eligibility. This is just going into how folks who serve between these periods may now receive care upon enrollment for the VA. Those that served in active duty theater of combat operations during these periods may now enroll for VA care. In the past, many folks may be familiar, it was if you enrolled within 5 years of discharge, you were automatically enrolled in VA healthcare. If you went beyond that period and you missed the boat, I think it was 3 years at one point, 4 years, it went back and forth. If you missed that initial period and you had good income and you came into the VA, we might tell you you're not eligible for healthcare. You make too much money, you're not service-connected disabled. This is opening up the door for folks to be reconsidered for that eligibility and enrollment. So that's the Vietnam era healthcare eligibility. As I mentioned, in the past, folks were not able to claim certain eligibilities for Agent Orange and other toxic exposures if they didn't have boots on the ground. This shows other theaters and places during that period that folks may be considered eligible or may file a disability claim. And you'll note that there are places, Guam, American Samoa, Cambodia, which, a lot of our Vietnam vets, Cambodia and Laos, I hear it all the time at the hospital. I served in Vietnam, but I was also in and out of Cambodia. They won't acknowledge it, etc. These are these other theaters where folks may have flown over, operated in, and are now considered. And then, of course, Johnson Atoll, where we did have nuclear warhead testing.
And Joe, to point out, they did change the dates for in-country for Vietnam as well. So they now expanded those both on the front end and on the back end for that.
Exactly. Yeah, yes, sir. So for those Vietnam vets out there or family members of Vietnam vets, it's important to take a look at this stuff and get in contact with the VSO through Department of Veteran Services. They can help you file a new claim. Expanding mammography screenings through the Service Act. This is information related to how we are considering additional resources be dedicated specifically to our growing women veteran population. It's the fastest growing veteran population in the country. As many of you may know, many of our veterans these days are women, and they're serving in increasingly combat-related theaters as well. And so what this is expanding who is considered eligible for toxic exposure screening. Signed into law June 7th. The Service Act expands eligibility for clinically appropriate mammography screening for veterans of any age who served in certain locations, bodies of water, airspace above. And so these are also related to the ones that I mentioned before, those theaters of operation. And toxic exposure screening and education. So this is a huge push that we at the Veterans Health Administration have underwent basically since January 1. And some of you who utilize VA healthcare may have noticed when you have gone into your primary care appointment, your nurse at the initial outset when they're doing their vitals and taking your blood pressure, they may have asked you if you served in these specific theaters of operation. And that's all part of our toxic exposure screening. What we're doing is we're asking folks and giving them the information and the opportunity at that point to say, yes, I served in Kuwait, I served in the airspace above the Middle East during these periods, whether it was, even just taking cargo or whatever, what have you. You'll notice at your appointments, if you haven't already, that these screening questions are going to start being asked. The goal for VA nationwide is to have 80% of all primary care appointments have these toxic exposure screenings completed with follow-up. With the New Mexico VA healthcare system, the last figure I saw is we were at 89%, and we're one of the top ones in the country for our catchment area. As many of you know, our hospital is the New Mexico VA healthcare system in Albuquerque, which Raton is a satellite of. We're the only healthcare organization in the state for VA, but we are actively pursuing those exposure screenings, and we're one of the forefront leaders in the country.
How do you get PAC Act benefits? How do you file a disability claim? How do you get us to relook at it? How does a survivor go about taking on that process? So we've expanded our access to our offices. We've, and Samira has some things over here. We now have the ability to do our interviews from our office personnel, our public contact people. It's not the call center. We have the ability to do these virtually. If you need to meet with us, you can do it over video or a telephone call, or you can come into our office, you can meet with one of the New Mexico Department of Veteran Services officers, like our newbie over here in Las Vegas. Their VSOs are very helpful. They know the process, they know the forms. They're not going to do anything different than what you would do if you came into our office. They're trained on the same processes, the same forms, and they can give you good advice on how and what you need to get this process going and how to help your claim along. So if you were previously denied and filed a claim, you would use the VA form 20-0995. And there are, if you do get the presentation, there are links that you can click on to get to those forms. For the decision review, supplemental claim, most claims that were previously denied will not automatically be reviewed. So we need the veterans to come in and file for those. The mailings went out. It encouraged them to come into our offices and file. So they won't just automatically say, Joe was denied for brain cancer, we're going to re-adjudicate that. We need that person to come in and get a claim in. If a person has never filed, they're going to file that it's kind of a longer form. It's at 21526EZ. So you'll do that. If it's a survivor new claim, it's going to be that 21P534EZ. That's the application for dependency indemnity compensation, survivor's pension, and accrued benefits. So we encourage outreach to the communities. You know, we're only doing these to try and get out to the communities. We can only hit who we can with this information, but people like you out in your communities can say, hey, I remember you served. Do you know about the PAC Act? You know, I've been doing that with people that my wife works with. I said, hey, you're getting out. Make sure you go to the hospital and go through the registry exams. You guys went over to Iraq, or you guys were in a UAE. So encourage the veterans you know to go relook at things. You know, take a look at and see if they're eligible for new things.
Real quick, you know, Scott mentioned all these different forms, and the reason why we mention all the VSOs, the Veteran Service Officers and Veteran Service Organizations, is, you know, it's a lot of jargon and numbers and letters, and it can be confusing. I've filed my own, and I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But these folks here, actually, Jesus over there, actually is the gentleman who helped me with one of mine. And so it's important to go with these folks. We have Ray here from Southern Colorado. For you Trinidad folks, we understand that the Raton CBOC also serves this region of Colorado, the southeast region of Colorado. So these folks, it's not just New Mexico. We have Colorado. We have folks out of the Arizona Veterans Service Office that help those folks in the Four Corners area as well. So absolutely, please go through a veteran service organization, and the state ones are the best. That's all they do. They know our processes. They know who to talk to. These guys have us on speed dial. It's seeing them at these events is almost like seeing family, because we're always at the same things, so we just pick up the phone and call each other. So please talk to your local VSOs.
Yeah, and the other nice thing about going through DVS is they'll hook you up with all the state benefits that they talked about earlier. So they're going to say, hey, we're filing a claim for this. Hey, you're eligible for a license plate. You're eligible for your tax exemption. So they're going to get into that state side and not just take care of the VBA side or the VHA side. They're going to get those state benefits in there for you as well. So here's some data. And this was as of the 11th, so this was last, what was that, Friday? 11th, Friday, Thursday? So this is just for the state of New Mexico. We've completed 508 claims related to PAC Act. So for Gulf War presumptive. So this is from the 1990 forward. Processing time, we're averaging about 55 days, 156 days. So, you know, that's pretty good when, you know, 15 years ago, we were looking at 2 to 3 years to process a claim. And we'd have numerous congressionals on why we were taking so long. So we've drastically improved the claim process and timeliness. The grant rate right now, which is really high, the grant rate is 70%. So that's telling us that 70% of those veterans coming in and filing a claim are getting granted first time filing. So we've had 356 claims granted. We currently have 234, and our net awards is $2.087 million. Okay, that's
Since January.
from January 1st, and we're
Or May, yeah.
May 15th. So in 5 months, we've granted over $2 million in net awards.
That's just New Mexico.
Just New Mexico. So we're getting those done. As you can see on the right side, those are the common disabilities that are currently being applied for. So allergies, allergic rhinitis, asthma, sinusitis, 2 different kinds of that, and pansitis. So a lot of sinusitis. But you know, just to give you, that's just a quick breakdown of some of the things that our office has done since January 1st on these claims. We have the link there to the forms. We have the link there to the PAC Act, the healthcare application, as well as the registry for the airborne and burn pit registries. So definitely utilize those, share those. It's public information. We want this stuff out there. We want people to apply.
And in that vein, again, we mention a lot of post 9/11 and post Gulf War veterans, but you know, one thing we hear all the time is the Vietnam era, and between that area, Vietnam and Gulf War, this is expanding to everybody. So it's important that everybody, if you know a veteran, anyone, get this information to them. One more thing, I'll have some handouts present out here. Our table out here, Mr. D.W. Stevens is out here, and he'll be able to answer any questions. We'll remain around after the break to answer questions. So I'll have some of this on my handouts too that will be available on this table.
So as part of the healthcare division, we coordinate veteran programs for homelessness, housing, behavioral health, advocating for healthcare issues for veterans and their families, as an advocate for our women veterans as well as our men veterans. If there's issues, I need to or want to know about it so I can advocate, have an understanding, move forward, and find out how I can find the best resources, better resources, work with the VA or other resources in the community to help veterans and their families get the services and benefits so they can move on with their life. Some big initiatives is the suicide prevention, homelessness, and of course, transportation in the rural areas. In the third quarter of 2022, we provided 137 round trips. So we are out here, we are doing it in the 15 highly rural areas. Again, I have gotten some information from the audience here. I will be reaching out to you, Diane Warning Brown, our director, will be reaching out to you. We'll have a conversation and see how we improve on what we have to ensure our veterans get the services that they so deserve and need, okay? Good. As you can see, there was an allocation of $200,000 in the juvenile for homelessness and disabled veterans throughout the state. We are currently working on getting out to all areas, getting some information printed so that we can get the word out on suicide as well as homelessness to help our veterans get housed and keep living a healthy life. Again, you can see this map, and I did hear something about 2 days. The requirement is 3 days in advance. And I do understand that sometimes there are cancellations, either the VA, the veteran, or the provider providing the ride. If that happens, please give us a call so we can have an understanding, so we can deal with that information, so we can have an understanding that we need to improve on those services and what that's going to look like. and there's the number. I do have some flyers on my table. If you haven't gotten any, I will be leaving some stuff here for someone here to maintain. And you can get that, and we'll also provide the slides. Next slide, please. Moving to our Women Veterans Program. We are here to advocate. I am here to advocate for our women veterans throughout the state to ensure that them and their families are aware of their state and federal benefits, and ensuring that if there are issues or concerns that our female veterans are having, that they reach out to me, let me know, have a conversation in private or otherwise, so that I can go back and address those issues and improve on those. In case you didn't know, there's roughly 16,600 female veterans in the state of New Mexico. And we are the best, I say we because I am a veteran, we are the best in the subcategory of our veterans. And by 2029, it is expected that 27.4% will be utilizing their VA benefits, which is great. Because with that, it's being here today, I don't see any female veterans, I don't know, maybe there are some, I don't believe so. There's two. One. And myself. So, making sure that we have and encourage our women veterans to identify as female veterans. And a lot of times we ask, are you a veteran? Some women will say no. We ask them, did you serve? They'll say yes. Well, then you're a veteran. And so when you see a veteran, encourage them to connect with the VA, connect with DVS, connect with all the VA programs out there. Some of the concerns and issues that really play hard with our women veterans are obviously homelessness. No one thinks of too many women veterans as homeless, but they are. When I think of MST, which is military sexual trauma, every day we have more and more female veterans coming forward and filing claims. Maybe you know somebody who is a female veteran, please share with them. There's help, and they don't have to deal with that alone. And it's hand in hand with PTSD that it is unfortunate, but it is the case. Looking to ensure that I get connected in all 33 counties, and even the smaller areas within those counties, to make sure that we're reaching out to all our veterans. Next slide, please. Here's our contact information, and I will get to the slides. Diane Morgan-Brown, who is our director, Connie Vargas, who is our social worker and transportation coordinator, myself, and Jeremy Anaya, who is our DISOPS specialist. I have a conference coming up for the Women Veterans Conference. It's in June. It is already full. I will be coming out to these other areas and doing some different little outreaches so that people and the female veterans who aren't or weren't able to make it to Albuquerque, that we can still celebrate our female veterans out here as well. If you have any questions, needs, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me.
Drake Lemaster, born and raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My wife's family's from up around Mora and Guadalupe. My mother's family's from Chama. Both my mother served in the U.S. Navy in Korea. My dad served in Air Force Korea. A lot of my uncles, World War II, Korea. So a lot of veterans on both sides of the family. I broke ranks, joined the Marine Corps. I'm the only Marine in my entire family. Everybody else is Army, Navy, Air Force, no Coast Guard. That being said, about 40-ish years ago, I got involved in the real estate industry and started realizing that there was an issue with veterans, that realtors were guiding veterans down a bad path when it comes to home ownership. I think the biggest reason why is that veterans ultimately don't understand the VA process. How many of y'all have got a VA loan or dealt with the VA when it comes to mortgages? Okay? If you try to do it yourself, it's a very complex process, isn't it? Okay? What we do at Veterans Loan Service Center, we help people navigate through the process. Can you go to the next slide, please? We're going to talk about our mission, loan benefits, additional loan options, the VA pre-approved process, and some testimonies. The mission of Veterans Loan Service Center is to proudly serve the veteran community and their families' needs through careful evaluation and implementation of unique strategies. We strive to educate veterans on the VA loan benefits and, if needed, prepare a plan in following months to purchase a home. We want our borrowers to feel empowered throughout the home buying or refinance process. We want to educate veterans on the process. Okay, not they're going to be expert. The VSOs, they do a phenomenal job. But understand the VA loan process, that's a different level. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. I continue to still learn the process. One of the big questions that comes to me all the time is, I had a veteran call me about probably 10 years ago. Went to divorce, lost his house. He said, I can't ever do a VA loan. I said, no, you have your second tier entitlement. So even though you blew it one time, they give you a second chance. So we can help evaluate that and say your second tier entitlement is $300,000, $400,000. How many of y'all know under President Trump, he eliminated the loan limits for VA loans? You want to buy $1 million house, $2 million house, you can qualify, you can buy one. Most folks don't know that. They think, oh, it only can be $500,000 or $600,000. Absolutely not. They basically remove that limitation. Now, if you mess up and you blow it for whatever reason, then the second tier entitlement, then they restrict you. It's got to be a minimum about $144,000, and it can be up to maybe another $400,000 or $500,000 or $600,000, depending upon the one that you basically lost. The nice thing about the VA loans, and I think one of the best benefits, it's 100% financing. So let's say you find a house for $250,000. VA will guarantee 100%. And by the way, VA doesn't loan the money. They work through banks who loan the money and give the VA guarantee. Okay, in order to do that, we get your certificate of eligibility, make sure you have your entitlement. I've had numerous vets come to me in this process, and they got a less than honorable discharge. Sometimes the VA says, yes, you can have the VA loan, other times not. If they don't do that, they can appeal it and go through it. We just had one just a few days ago come back, and they said, no, he's basically is not eligible. He had bad conduct and got out less than honorable. He doesn't get it again. Now, can he appeal that again? He can. All right? So the VA loan fund, 100% financing. Now, that doesn't cover the closing cost. When you buy a house, there's going to be a portion, the realtor negotiates closing costs and your prepays. So it could be another $4,000 or $5,000. Now, working with the right realtors that we've established across New Mexico, a lot of them are veterans, they can help negotiate where the seller will pay for all your closing costs. So if we do it properly, the veteran walks in, 100% on the house, the closing costs and prepays, they move in, they're out of pocket again, no money. Okay? And what we do, the Veteran Service Center, we do this here pro bono. We don't charge a penny. We incur cost. I found some of the younger veterans, they neglected their credit, and their credit's a mess. So what we do is help them navigate through that process with collections, charge-off, late pays, no credit, and guide them through the process of how to build their credit. By the way, VA does not require you have any credit. They don't. But most banks say, oh, we need at least a 620. What if the person, I had a veteran recently, had a 509? Not a good credit situation. What happened? Identity theft. Doesn't matter. So guess what? I've identified lenders that will work with them. Okay? So we want to become a resource for state of New Mexico only. I've got people call me from Virginia sometimes, Texas. I can talk to them, but I don't have the ability to basically work other than New Mexico only. Okay? So, okay, VA loan, the benefits there, second tier entitlement, we talked about that. Okay, the nice thing about VA also is if you do a conventional loan or an FHA loan, you pay what's called mortgage insurance. VA loan, you don't pay mortgage insurance. And that's simply an insurance policy you get to pay in the event you default. When I got this business years ago, like, why do we pay mortgage insurance? Why don't the bank pay it? They said, no, you're a risk. And they're going to go ahead and charge you insurance policy called mortgage insurance above and beyond your home insurance. VA does not have mortgage insurance, okay, which is nice. All right. If you're, we talked about the seller concession, 4%. VA allows a 4%. I had a call earlier from Jose Contreras. He's an Army vet. His son's a veteran, and they're looking to make an offer down in Las Lunas. He's navigating through the whole process and said, listen, I educated the realtor who was also a veteran, and said, here's the way it is. You can get up to so much money, negotiate, and that'll cover all this closing costs and prepaid. So it was done properly. Like I said earlier, they can walk in with no money out of pocket. A lot of vets think that they don't have to pay the closing costs and prepaid. They do. And VA's not going to finance that. All right? Now, another area we're doing is across right now is helping veterans understand construction loans. Construction loans have been a very complex process for many, many years. It used to work out where you would go get a loan from the bank, build your house. At the end when your house is built, you get another loan to pay off the construction loan. We've worked out with some banks. They'll do it. You qualify one time. That's it. All the money is set aside in the bank. You build your house. Once you're getting your house, you start making payments. It's a really streamlined process. Anybody who wants to understand construction loans, We basically identified some banks that do that, did a very good job at that. Tax exemption. Okay, if you're 100% service connected, guess what? You go to DVS, you get the tax exemption, take it to the county after you buy a house, next cycle comes out tax billing, you pay 0 property tax. Okay, as long as it says total and permanent. The key is, some guys they say they're 100%, but doesn't have the total and permanent. At that point, they get a discount, but they're not going to get the 100%. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, VA IRL. This is when somebody, let's say a veteran right now, you don't see this happening now. In the last year and a half, rates have doubled. I can remember 15, 16 months ago, rates were in the 2.75, 3%. Now rates have jumped up, in most cases, high 5s, mid 6s, depending upon your credit. They essentially doubled. So right now, you're not seeing this happening. But as time goes on, inflation goes down, rates will go down. So we're getting people in the houses right now, 5.875, 6%, 6.75, etc. When the market goes down, they can do this. What happens is there's no appraisal required, no income documentation required. All they ask is you've made at least 6 consecutive payments, and you lower your rate by at least 0.5%. This is basically a beautiful program here. Doesn't cost the veteran nothing, and when it basically, let's say they're to 6%, rates go down to 4%, lower the rate, save them money. It's a win-win situation. We help them navigate through that whole process. Okay. Next slide.
Excuse me, Drake, so is it just a 0.5%?
It's got to be a 0.5% reduction. So if you're at a 6%, it's got to go to 5.5%.
Right.
In most cases, I say let's get at least maybe a 1%. And they also look and say you got to get your whatever closing cost. There's no appraisal, but there'll be some prepays and other costs involved, title company charges. You got to get your money back in 36 months. That's the criteria. Okay. All right. Pre-approval process. So basically, what we do is help the veteran basically get the basic information. We help them obtain their certificate of eligibility, okay? And then based upon that, we'll know exactly what they can do or not do at that point, okay? And we'll evaluate their credit, debt to income, financials, confirm veterans qualified. See, a lot of basically people I've seen in this industry, they issue a pre-approval. They never validated everything. They never looked at their credit, their debt, their income, their budget. So in this case here, they've got a pre-approval, and I've had people call me and say, I was ready to close, we thought, a week from now, and now they're not closed. They said I have too much debt or credit. Well, for some reason, they don't go through and evaluate properly the entire information. We basically want to make sure when we work with a veteran, all the way through, from start to finish, we basically help them out to understand the whole process. So when they're basically pre-approved, they're pre-approved, okay? And then, of course, realtors. How many have dealt with realtors in your lifetime? Okay, and I've heard this many times. Realtors say, why are you doing a VA loan? Let's go USDA. Let's go FHA, conventional. VA bar none is the best loan in America if you're eligible. There's no comparison. However, some realtors had a bad experience with a bank who didn't understand the VA loan process, and they had a bad experience, so they guide their veteran to another program. I had a veteran call me from Gallup, about a month ago or 2 months ago. Husband passed away, and she had an adjustable rate mortgage. And rates are going up, so what's happening? Her rates are going up. So we helped her refinance and basically be able to reduce the whole process, okay? So again, we want to educate veterans on this whole process from start to finish. Next one, please. Okay, here's a testimony. About 2 years ago, I got a call from Las Cruces, from one of the VSOs down there, Rosa. She's no longer with you guys. And she basically had a Vietnam veteran that had been turned down 3 or 4 banks. He had 0 credit, never owned a house in his lifetime, 100% service connected, living in a rat-infested, mold-infested, single-wide trailer, very sick, almost died. And we were able to help him get a loan with no credit. Credit, he didn't exist. He haven't had credit for probably 25, 30 years, mid-70s. Well, guess what? We were able to take his cell phone bill, insurance, other alternative trade lines, show his ability to pay. Because again, VA says you don't need to have credit. But all these banks say you have to. We're able to help him navigate through the process. He's in a house today. Okay? So like I say, we've had numerous other veterans throughout New Mexico that have called us with writing. We had one recently, referred I think by Dustin in Rio Rancho. Her husband passed away and their income went from here to here, in half. And she's got a payment of almost $3,000 a month. And she's got $3,300 a month coming in. her utility bill is another $800. So and then she finds out she has cancer, a lot of complications. Make a long story short, we sit down with her, went through the process, helped her out. So what she's looking to do is go ahead and sell her house, which is a big house. She had probably $250,000 equity, shift over, buy another house, bring her payment down to $1,000 a month. She can live very comfortably. Unfortunately, the daughter got involved recently, called and says, we want to stop the process. And the realtor, who's a retired Colonel of the Marine Corps, was helping her out, said, no problem, not a problem at all. For some reason, and this is the tough part, family, friends are giving her bad information and she could possibly lose her house. We can't control that. We basically educated her, helped her through the process. She also had 4 insurance claims in the last 4 years. The insurance company said, we're canceling you. We tried to help her with several insurance people. Nobody would insure her. Her and that house is not a fit. So they're going to force the 15th this month, probably double or triple her insurance payment, and she's going to be in a bad situation. So I always tell people, be careful. I know you have loved ones and friends and relatives. When it comes to the loan process, talk to someone who really understands the process. They can educate you, give you the facts, and guide you through the process. I think that's about it, right? Yep. So in summary, we're here to educate our veterans. We do this year. We travel across the state. We want to help out veterans. If we can help out one veteran out there understand the process and not be taken advantage of and do something they shouldn't be doing. And another big one I see is sometimes they overcommit, because VA does not have any debt-to-income ratios. Other loans have debt-to-income ratio. So veterans sometimes overextend themselves and buy a house, and 70% of their income is going to the mortgage payment. Probably not a good strategy, okay? So we'll try to help them understand that let's maybe taper it down, educate them on their living expenses and what's going on with everything else. If you want to be house poor, which some people are, that's fine. We want to educate people. So that's what we do. Any questions at all?
2 questions, and I'm with DVS, by the way. One, maybe kind of off a tangent, but what is your position on reverse mortgages? I'm hearing a lot of that, and I saw an ad or heard an ad specifically referencing veterans, and so just out of your curiosity.
Reverse mortgages have their place. My uncle was a Korean War vet, Navy, 20-some years in the Navy. About 6 years ago, he sat down, he did a reverse mortgage, and here's his logic. He wanted to be able to go ahead and enjoy the rest of his life, him and his wife, and he was comfortable, but he wanted to start traveling, doing some more things. He had all this equity in a house in Paradise Hills, so he wanted to go and access it. He did access it. He had no kids. Well, one daughter, but he didn't recognize her. That's a different thing. So he said, I don't want to leave her nothing. So in his case, it made sense. He wanted to enjoy it because who's going to leave it to? Nobody. So they basically did a reverse mortgage. I've seen other people have been in a situation. We helped a World War II veteran about a year and a half ago, 96 years old. And he was in a bad situation. They had pretty good money coming in, but he had horrifying credit. All the grandkids and kids were basically sucking off grandpa and grandma, mom and dad, and you see what happened. He was taking all their money, and they were just in a bad situation. So we helped them be able to go ahead and do reverse mortgage, eliminate that whole situation. And so in some cases, it has its place. Depending upon the situation, it can work. And the nice thing about it is that you won't make another payment for the rest of your living life. As long as you're in that house, you'll never make, either yourself or the last surviving spouse will never make a payment. Once that happens, they pass, then they have 6 months to a year, work with the bank, and they can pay off that loan and get the home or whatever the case might be.
Great.
Okay.
Are you going to be around still?
Yes, we'll be around.
I'll talk to you.
You got it. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Korean veteran, 85, and I'm 80. Do our ages preclude us from a VA loan?
Absolutely not. You can be 95 or 100 years old. That's discrimination. Federal law violates that. So there's no age restrictions at all. None. None.
Go buy a house.
You can do that. Yeah. So.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So, and we talked about this earlier as well. So if, and I think you mentioned it, if you have a loan currently, can you re-access your COE and then do another loan?
Great question. It's called your second tier entitlement. I had a gentleman, Army vet, called me about 4 years ago. Lived in Rio Rancho. The market was not as high as it was now. It was down. He said, I want to sell my house and buy another one. Grandma and Grandpa was going to sell my house for $150,000, worth at least $250,000 or more. And he couldn't sell it. I said, Shane, why don't you this year? Why don't you just go ahead and lease that house? Okay, because he was going to sell it, he would have lost $15,000, $20,000. He'd have to come to the table with. It was how he was upside down. And so he leased it out, bought Grandma and Grandpa's house. I've never seen this happen. For $150,000, appraiser came in at $300,000. He got a fantastic deal. That's just second-tier entitlement. So we had a second-tier entitlement. He released that one out there. The condition is that when you do a second home, it's got to be, you got to have an intent to occupy that as your primary residence. VA will not do investment property or traditional second homes. But if you basically say, hey, this is my primary residence, affidavit, you can do it. Now, let's say in a year's time, I don't want to be in this house anymore. What can you do? Well, at that time, you can either sell it or lease it. Okay?
So you can rent out your existing
Current
home?
one, and then use your second tier for a primary.
Oh, okay. So
Correct.
if I were to go out, I would have to rent out my current home and say that's going to be my primary residence
Correct.
in order to get that second loan.
Exactly right.
Okay.
There's, just a question, there's not a catch with the, you don't have to pay off that loan, you pay off the one that you're leasing?
No, sir.
First?
No, you can leave it there. As long as you have your entitlement, I think it's 726, my son's better than I am, number 726. So let's say you have a $250,000 loan now. You still have over $500,000 on your second tier entitlement.
Okay.
Now, if you're first tier, let's say you sold the house and you had your full entitlement in your first tier, you can go to $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. But in your second tier, there's limitations on that.
Okay.
Okay?
That's new information.
It will help evaluate.
I always assumed that, again, you couldn't get that second loan
No.
until.
Not
so,
correct. No.
Thank you for
And
that.
most folks don't educate people, and we help people all the time navigate through that process. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So it may be for you or maybe for Ed or the team. So I'm receiving a DIC for my spouse who was 100% total and permanent. Does that figure in for the tax exemption, the property tax exemption, if she was 100% total and permanent?
That's a great question.
If
Now,
she was, and you're now the widowed
Yeah.
spouse, and she was 100% P&T, yeah, you're entitled to that
100%
certificate. Yeah,
tax.
you're entitled to that certificate now.
now, correct me if I'm wrong. In that house, right, if he buys another house,
He can transfer it. That's the new law.
I just
I
bought a
just
house
talked-
as my primary.
I just talked to one of your VSOs. Thanks for collecting
Yeah,
it. Said-
sure. But
That's great.
What did Jeff tell you that? If because of the new law that passed, if you pass, or if your wife passed, and you're gonna move, yes, you can transfer that.
Great, fantastic. I won't mention names. I talked to a VSO, and they said you can't do that.
Yeah.
Thank you
You
for
couldn't
clarifying.
before. You couldn't before, you can now.
Fantastic, thank you.
But does that go into effect July?
Yeah, it goes into effect.
That's probably why it
Yeah.
goes into
Okay, it's
effect
coming,
July.
okay, so it's just, okay,
Yeah.
The
great.
new-
It just passed this last session.
Outstanding.
So it
That's
goes
great
into effect
news.
now,
Great
July
news.
1.
There's also that issue that's gonna go on the ballot, that's gonna tie the property tax exemption to the disability rating. So for 80%.
Fantastic.
It just passed.
10%, yeah.
That's great.
And also another separate one, and we're gonna encourage everybody to vote, it's going to bump up the exemption, they're asking to bump it up from 4,000 to 10,000. So,
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you, I love New Mexico. We're a very veteran-friendly state, and thanks for DVS. We're looking forward to continue to be a resource in the years to come.
The reason I'm here today is I want to talk about New Mexico Workforce Connections. Our agency in Raton has been closed for 10 years. We're coming up on a year of being open. This is my first time in this agency and in a state agency, so I'm definitely learning lots, taking lots of training. In fact, I know we do offer programs to assist veterans. I know we offer other programs to assist the youth, which just this past week, just to kind of give you an idea, this past week I just found out that, about work permits for underage children to work. So I mean, in a year's time, it's taken this long to get some of this information. So even though I don't have all the information about all the programs that we do offer veterans, I'm happy to look into it. I'm happy to find out that information and assist in any way. I'm here to serve my community, including all the veterans in the community. And we basically offer employment services. So I assist with unemployment claims. I assist with trying to find employment if you're in need of employment. And I also assist employers to try to fill those positions. Part of that is also uploading what we call a job order on a state website. And one of the services we do offer on our job orders is for the first 24 hours, those job orders are specifically open to only veterans. After that 24-hour period, it is released to the general public, but I can at least offer that, you know, with our job orders, they are offered up for veterans as well. So there's a veterans hold on there. Other than that, I don't really have a whole lot to offer. I know we're going to be doing a hiring event now in June. We are trying to help businesses in our community to fill some of their positions. There are quite a few businesses here in Raton that are needing 10+ employees, so that's the reason for this event. Typically in the year, I've been told that they can do anywhere from 3 to 6 to 12 a year, just depending on the situation, the economics of the area, just a whole lot of stuff. And we can do these services for a specific business, or we can have it wide, broad, and open, which is what this next hiring event is going to be. So we're going to try to have different organizations, different businesses have a variety. That way people who come to this event will be able to have different offerings. We are also reaching out to some of our partner programs that we work with to see who's would be able to be a part of this hiring event, but we also display and talk about these jobs on a podcast. So we feature a lot of these jobs, and we just try very hard to help out our community, and we have colleagues. In fact, I have a colleague here today from another county, and we work together as counties and with our other partner programs to try to service our state, service our communities, service our counties. So I'm here to service my community. I'm here to help anybody who's in need of assistance. And even if I don't know the answers, I will find it out, and I will do my best to help anybody in this community or otherwise. That's all I have for today.
Chicky, what's the street address? Do you have an office?
Yes, I'm located in the Human Services Department. We are on 1233 Whittier Street. And I also have, I can provide my phone number as well, and I have cards up here for anybody who would want any of that information. But my office number is 505-803-6931, and I have a web address of Chicky, and that's chicky.gomez@dws.nm.gov. Alrighty, that does it for me.
Chicky,
Yes.
Mr. Gomez, can you tell me when that hiring event is?
Yes, June 21st from
21st.
9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Raton Convention Center.
Raton Convention Center.
Yes.
Is there a flyer for that? Do you know if they developed a
Yes,
flyer?
yes, I'm waiting approval, but there is a
Okay, when
flyer.
you get that flyer,
If you send it to me, you
Yeah.
have my contact information, then I'll distribute it.
Absolutely.
we'll have Ray,
Yeah.
e-blast it out as well. This way we're tracking that.
Well, if you all can share with us as well, we can put it on our social media for
Okay.
the hospital.
Yep.
Okay. Will do.
And you can get it up to Colorado as well, and have our Colorado VSO kind of get that information out too.
Alrighty, does anybody else have any questions or anything else for me that I can possibly answer or help with?
That's it.
Alrighty, well, thank you all for your time.
Sir.